what we eat on a daily basis predicates the world we want to create. And that starts with our inner world as well. The blue zone's the longest living people on the planet that typically live long, fulfilled lives. 95% plus of their diet is made up of whole plant foods.
There's a myth about protein. There's this idea that we're going to eat a steak and then it's going to magically appear as a bicep.
Welcome to Commune. We are on a mission to inspire, heal, and bring the world closer together.
You guys are identical twins, is that correct?
Yeah, we're identical twins. We're 42 years old. We were part of a twin study back, it could be 10 years ago now. And
it feels like 3 years.
It feels like 3 years. But they had 60 sets of identical twins, 60 sets of non-identical twins. It was a study done in University College Dublin, so locally. And they wanted to see the nature versus nurture. And they put us all, they tested us for hours, like multiple times. And we were the most identical set of them. We were like mirror twins. So we were 99.9999 recurring percent genetic identical material.
Wow.
So in a weird way, I have 3 children, he has 2 children. And if they were to check do a paternity test, we're fathers to them all, which is a bit weird, but
yeah, it sounds weird, but that's modern science. I'm sure they could figure out a way to find out who's who's. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, it does take a community. And I have an ulterior theory about your genetic similarity is that, well, I think identical twins, I believe, is a result of the fertilization of a single egg that splits in 2.
Yeah.
So you already got that going for you. But my sense is that you guys have the same diet, so you probably have identical microbiome. And of course, we have about 20,000 genes, more or less. But the bacteria in our guts, there's about 1.6 million genes in there. So if you're sharing those as well, that's got to make you the most genomically similar people world over.
Except I could challenge that because I know a friend he did a master's or a doctorate in like, all that kind of microbiome and, microbiology and whatnot. And he was saying that even us being genetically identical, he said we will be more identical to our partners who we live with and share the same environment with on a much more regular basis, like sleep with and spend hours with and are intimate with. Like we're much more likely to have the same microbiomes as them as we are one another, which I thought was very interesting.
There you are.
There it is. Yeah, I've heard that as well, that we share more genetic makeup as it pertains to our bacteria with the people that we live with versus like our parents, for example. Well, my dad has a hard time getting his head around that. He doesn't like that idea at all. All right. So as I was thinking about this, I was thinking you guys possess 2 secrets that have evaded humankind for millions of years. All right.
Ooh,
this is good. Okay. 1, how to be happy. All right. And 2, what to put in our mouths. We still haven't figured these things out. So my goal over the next 75, 90 minutes, whatever we have, is to pry these keys to these riddles from the Irish
solve it all.
from the hidden Irish fog of gray stones.
I love that.
But let's build the suspense a little bit. And I'm hoping that you could build the scaffold of our conversation with a bit of your biography of how you guys came to be the Happy Pear.
Okay, cool. So I met Steve in the womb.
Hey,
that was a good one. Woo-hoo. Okay, that was awful. So we grew up in a small little town in Ireland. It's called Greystones. It's 20k south of Dublin, and grew up in a family of all boys. So 4 boys. We're 42, so born in 1979. And, Ireland was very much, being a product of 4 boys, we were very competitive, super competitive and being an identical twin, you're even more competitive because you're competing for attention and love and you're competing for your dinner and you're competing for the last bowl of this and the last sweet.
And your clothes.
And everything every day. So we are hyper competitive. So by the time we were teenagers, say we were 17, 18, we were playing semi-pro rugby. We were both off scratching golf. We had played baseball for Ireland. We were, we played every game under the sun. And, at that stage we were quite interested. Obviously we were attracted towards, like, we're both heterosexual. So we were attracted to women. So we went to all boys schools, and you got great social credit when you kissed a pretty girl. So that was kind of part of our
sporting endeavors.
Our sporting endeavors as well, so we were hyper competitive. And then by the time we finished school, I remember we didn't really care. Like we hadn't really thought about anything, what we wanted to do other than...
No, I'd change that. I'd say we were quite disconnected. We really didn't know what we were interested in, because we'd learned how to pass exams. We'd learned how to excel at sport, and we'd learned how to, party and kind of meet women and, progress that. So university was kind of like, I don't know what I'm into. Dad, what do you think? Business. Okay, great. Yeah, that sounds like a good practical thing. And I just want to go to college because there's more girls in college than there is in an all boys school. So yeah.
So we both ended up studying business in separate universities because I didn't get as many points as him. Otherwise, we would have been sitting beside one another. But so we studied business, and certainly when we studied it, there was an underlying theme of, in business, it was like, if you make loads of money, then you're going to be happy. And that was the kind of subtext. And I remember at the time, like, both me and Steve were about like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a stockbroker and I'm going to make like millions by the time I'm 30. And then I'm going to play tennis in Wimbledon. And then I'm going to
do what I like then.
Yeah. Then I'm going to do all that kind of stuff. And that was the kind of subtext which we both had gone on. And then by the time we kind of come into our final year and finishing business, we both had lost, like, we just didn't believe it anymore. We just didn't believe that, money and capitalism was
the American dream.
The American dream just didn't seem like we both were starting to feel like there's something else here. There's something more in here. So I remember we finished university, and Steve just kind of says to me, he says, Dave, I'm going away. I'm going away traveling. You're not coming with me, and I'm not coming back till I'm happy. It's like, what's that, Steve? Oh my God. Because obviously we sat beside one another. We shared a wardrobe literally every day of our lives. We hadn't really spent any time apart. And he had this idea gone off by himself. So he ended up going off to Canada. He went off to Whistler.
I largely went to Whistler because I remember watching videos, and it seemed like there was loads of parties, loads of pretty women. And I thought, great, we were born in Canada, so we had Canadian passports. I was like, great, what a wonderful place to start with. And over the next couple of years, we kind of traveled, and, this is back pre-social media. We didn't have a mobile phone. So it was quite anonymous when you traveled. So you had the great social fluidity to, like, we grew up in a small little town, everyone kind of knew us. You kind of had your specific role. At the time we were jocks, we played rugby, we were high achievers, we went to university, we were going places. And then when I arrived in Whistler, suddenly no one knew me. So it was like, great, I wonder who I'll be now. So I remember kind of going, like, there's loads of parties and loads of beautiful people. And it's like, I've done that. I don't want to do that. So I remember I got a job, ironically, up the mountain flipping burgers in a burger bar. But after work, every single day I'd get into the library in Whistler, which was a small little library, and there were vegetarian cookbooks. And I was just fascinated. I used to pour myself into vegetables, and I got to know a few other nerds that were into cooking with vegetables, and we'd have a vegetable potluck. And I remember I used to hitchhike for a couple of hours down to the local town down the road. And I remember I'd buy barley and I'd bring it back home, and I can't wait to try barley. This is going to be the most like mind-blowing thing I've never tried. And it tastes like rice. But it was like part of this culinary adventure. And kind of we both independently of each other. He went off by himself. So I went off to South Africa to go be a golf pro and tried that for a little bit. And this is like back when we were 21, so 20 years ago. And I realized that, there must be more to life than golf. I found it quite lonely, and I feel like there's much more going on here. But we ended up, for the next 2 years, we kind of traveled separately, really exploring what else life had on offer. And as Stephen said, we weren't kind of held in boxes, because there was no social media, there was no mobiles, there was no real email. So we were free. We were completely free to kind of follow our curiosities and kind of break down our own social conditioning, which we had. So we ended up, spending lots of time in farms and food. We changed our, like, as he said, we left, we were kind of semi-pro athletes that were into burgers and drink and getting drunk and parties. And kind of meat and two veg. This was kind of the diet we were reared on.
And then while traveling, we both immediately kind of something shifted. A seismic shift happened that we
gave up alcohol.
Yeah, we gave up alcohol just before we left. We were running a marathon, and we gave it up for a couple of weeks. And then that couple of weeks ended up being a couple of months. And then we ended up going traveling. And I guess we started feeling more ourselves. And it was the same over the next couple of years while we were away on this journey of self-discovery. We ended up changing our diets. We both stopped buying meat, stopped eating dairy, and got much more curious into spirituality. You know, we started into Vipassana meditation. We ended up going to these centers and meditating, and
polyamorous, egalitarian
feministic community. We ended up in all sorts of crazy, curious, different places. And it was really like, I remember I lived in a cave behind a waterfall in a cloud forest in Costa Rica for a bit. Sure, why wouldn't you? You know, we were trying all sorts of weird things and fasting and all sorts of different things anyway. And then anyway, one day Steve calls me up. This is 2003. And he says, Dave, I got this idea. Do you want to like start a food revolution? And this was his words. And I go, revolution? Oh, Steve, yes. And I thought, like, in my head, I was thinking like Che Guevara and like, you know, we're going to storm the parliament. We're going to overthrow things. This is going to be so exciting stuff. Yeah, brilliant. And then he says, do you want to start like a vegetable shop, Dave? And it was like, you said revolution and vegetable shop in the same sentence, Steve, here. I'm not quite getting you. But of course, I'm your twin. Of course I'm in. Like, yeah, let's do it. So we ended up kind of coming back, like we left as these two jocks that were quintessential, you know, meat and two veg, rugby players, you know, short back and sides, hair. And then we came back 2 years later as these two guys with long hair and beards and plaid pants and polyester shirts that painted their fingernails and
swam in the sea, ate
strong offensive body odors, didn't drink alcohol. We're now vegan and starting a vegetable shop. And this is in a small town. So people obviously thought we were weirdos. We'd lost our way.
And there was kind of an underlying theme in the community that they're definitely selling drugs at the back. Obviously we weren't, but there was, you know, you'd hear these whispers.
So that was yeah, obviously we weren't, but this was 17 years ago. This is 2004. We started a vegetable shop, and we ended up calling it the Happy Pear. But I remember,
why did we call it the Happy Pear, David?
Great question, Stephen. Thank you. We ended up because like the name Stephen wanted to call it. I remember the sign man. This is November the 26th, 2004. The sign man Declan, he was up on a ladder trying to put the name that we wanted on the sign above the shop. And he's up the ladder and he's trying to put them on, and we're sitting back proud as pie, like leaning against a car, looking at the shop front, like delighted with ourselves. We're going to have a shop. Yeah, brilliant. And Declan comes down after about 20 minutes and he says, lads, like, it's just your name's too long. Like, you're going to have to change it. It just won't fit properly. And we ended up calling it the Happy Pear because there was two of us and we were selling fruit, and like Happy Pear, it was like a pun. But the name Stephen wanted to call it, like our surname is Flynn, and the name that Declan was trying to fit in the sign and Stephen wanted to call it was Flinner's Fruit and Veg for Social Change. So that was the context that we started a vegetable shop with. It was like, we started a vegetable shop to change the world, to try to inspire more people to eat more fruit and veg, and to kind of promote a movement, to promote more
happiness and connection in the world. we'd found through our own journeys that we felt more connected, we felt more whole, we felt more like, and diet had it was a wonderful entry point for people to kind of connect with their food, connect with their community, and find more joy and happiness.
Yeah. So we started with a vegetable shop, and then it's been 17 years where it went from two of us to where, you know, we've had 250 people on our team at one stage and
passed over 10 million in revenue. We did
one of the years, but
cafes.
Now it's changed and evolved to where there's all sorts of bits of the business.
But I guess at a top level, we have at the moment now, pre-COVID, we had 4 cafes. Now we have 1 cafe. We've kind of learned that sometimes less is more. So we've 1 cafe that we're really pouring our heart into. We've 7 online courses where we had 50,000 people through, and they're wonderful, and we love that aspect.
Food products, we've 60 food products, vegan, plant-based food products in 1,000 stores in Ireland. So.
And then we've written 5 best-selling cookbooks.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's incredible. I can't wait to get some of these products over to the United States. I think they're in the UK now, right? But I don't believe that they've made it across the pond, and I was going through the suite of products, and there are many, and I was salivating last night. All of those sauces and those burgers, those veggie burgers look fantastic. Pestos, yeah.
Pestos are the ones that there's lots of good ones. Anyway, we've had fun over the years.
And you, how into the recipe making and tasting and kitchen work do you guys get into? Are you guys have your hands pretty involved there?
I was in there this morning at 5:10. So yeah,
nice.
And we're right now in the studio. So we've gone through phases. Like for the first maybe 10 years, we were like in the kitchen every day.
In the trenches.
In the trenches, leading the army. And it was such fun and adored it. And then kind of after our first book came out, it kind of led us more into kind of media and more into YouTube and more into trying to inspire people to eat more fruit and veg. And we kind of felt, this is our calling. I love this.
The mission. Vegetable missionaries.
And then it's only really in the last year, I'd say.
Last 2 years.
No, I'd say it's the last year. Well, maybe the last 2 years, but in particularly the last year, like COVID and the pandemic has kind of encouraged us more in terms of our physical presence. Like we had 4 cafes, now we have 1. And it's kind of forced us to really focus on trying to build one holy mountain. And like, if we do, like, often, you know, yourself, when you have a business, you're kind of expecting others. The new white hope is going to come in and they're going to fix it all. And then you realize you're kind of the heart of the business, you know, because we started it and we're kind of a huge driving force of it. And, you know, food is the very soul of our business. And it's kind of taken the last number of probably, 8 months we've been in the kitchen every day. And I love it. I have in particular, and I love it. I love it. And trying to build a team. And we started a sourdough bakery almost 2 years ago now. And I adore that. And anyway, having a great time with it. So
but we're still, the food bit is fun, like particularly the products bit, because we've got an NPD team, which is new product development. And Sean will work very much in terms of like, you know, all the ingredients, that the ideal ones. And then you've got to put it into, can it be sold at a certain price, and how do you get the shelf life and the packaging? So there's a whole sequence. Like writing a recipe that tastes good is the easiest thing in the world. But then you've got all these various steps that when it goes through all the various phases, does it still taste really good? That's the hard bit. And
can we get shelf life? Can we get packaging? Can we get, you know, where the costing and all the various things within it. So it's a fun game.
Yeah. I think we'd actually enjoy a conversation about how you build a business with soul, and when do you know when enough is enough? And maybe we can get there eventually in our conversation, because I had a lot of experience with this idea of growing a business that I really, really believed in and was a kind of reflection of my soul and my heart. But then I got so caught up in the growth part of it that I forgot what I really loved about it in the first place. I think it always brings you back to like, why did I start this thing in the first place? And do businesses with soul really just need to maintain that core essence, you know? And so anyways, I want to
can I talk briefly on that? Well, it's fresh.
Sure.
Like that totally happened to us. So I can 100% relate to it. Like back, maybe it was 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago,
in the recent past
number of years, my sense of time since having children has become a little bit more ephemeral. But maybe it's 7 years ago, we borrowed €1.5 million, and the goal was to open a number of cafes and to really try to make healthy plant-based foods more accessible. When we got the money, we kind of quickly opened one cafe, then we opened another cafe, then we opened one in the airport, then we kind of went to a central production facility. So we opened this big, and we called it Pearville, and it's 16,000 square foot, cafe roastery, and we did a studio, and it was huge, and we were quite afraid of this quantum leap, but it was like, this is part of growth. And then the food went from being made by a small team that really cared and knew every little bit of it to suddenly it was being run by a production manager. And it was like all about how can we reduce the cost of the inputs and how can we become more efficient and effective. And every time we'd come down to Pearville, you were meeting a new member of staff and you'd feel kind of like, wow, I wouldn't hire this person.
Maybe the thing is just that we lost our way a little bit, and exactly as you were saying. And, you know, I think that's the nature of life, that it's true. You know, it's a journey. It's a constant journey.
And that sometimes you over oscillate and sometimes you need to come back, and it's kind of that. But we're at a current phase, we're much more like small is beautiful and enough is where it is. And it's to
enough. I don't think there's an answer for that. What is enough? Like, I really don't, because like, you know, there's so many spiritual truths you could go with. Like there's the E.F. Shoemaker, small is beautiful. There's kind of going like, if you're not growing, you're dying. And where do you find the balance between that? Because while you exist and you're living, you need to be contributing in some way. So I don't know where the actual balance is. We couldn't give you a definitive answer to that now.
Yeah, it's a difficult metric. I think for us, we had about 170 people at our height of employment, and that point when I didn't know everybody's name, there was a strange discombobulation that came with that for some reason for me. And also, I don't know if you guys felt this too, but sometimes founders or visionaries, are really, really good at starting things, but from an operational perspective, that's not necessarily where our sweet spot is or what we're actually interested in day to day. So I don't know if you came across that too, where, oh man, you get so excited about an idea and you pour your creativity into it and you sort of grow this thing in the petri dish and you get it out and you're seeing that people are really reacting to it. But then from taking it there to operationalizing gets a bit boring, to be honest.
Yeah, totally. Well, like even if you think about it, the growth from kind of small to medium-sized business, like one business, it's all about growth. It's exciting. It's leadership. It's wild. It's the Rebel Alliance. And then suddenly as you kind of start getting into the kind of couple of hundred people, you need structures, you need systems, you need reporting lines. And for someone who's naturally creative, it's
naturally a rebel.
It's so the opposite. So I remember we used to call Pearville the Death Star, and we were the Rebel Alliance. We literally,
this is our business.
This is our business.
Your own business. Yeah.
That's what you call an autoimmune disease within the business. So we've fortunately identified it, and we've kind of we've had the surgery, and we've kind of learned a lot from that one.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about happiness, because I in researching about you guys, I came across Rich Roll's interview of you guys, and Rich actually lives very close to me. I see him from time to time, and I listen to his podcast for inspiration from time to time. And on that podcast, I believe I heard this one statement that really landed with me, which was the number one indicator for happiness is not money, it's health. And I was like, yeah, that rang particularly true. And, in some ways, I think you could say that health and happiness are almost synonymous. So, But happiness seems to be a much more ineffable thing. It's like hard to describe. Everybody's kind of chasing it. It seems like something that's always out there. But health or well-being, we actually seem to be able to understand that a little better. So, the way of trying to find and instantiate happiness in our life, maybe it's easier to focus on how we actually become healthy and let happiness just be a byproduct of healthfulness. So I've broken down health into 5 components in my own life: movement, restoration, nutrition, purpose, and community. So I want to maybe use that as goalposts a little bit for our conversation, as a means to forge a path, bushwhack a path to happiness, and kind of see how you guys approach in your own lives, some of those categories. So let's start with movement. Obviously, you guys have grown up incredibly athletic with golf and rugby, et cetera. But what are your primary movement practices? And I suppose swimming in the sea is probably inclusive to that too.
Yeah. So, okay, great question. Yeah. Movement, I guess we've been fortunate in that it's been part of our lives. So it's so ingrained in us that movement, if we don't move, we don't feel good. Like it's just so, and this is back to our mom. Like she had 4 boys and she just knew we were like a pack of dogs. And the same way, if you don't bring a dog out and throw a ball and make it run for a bit, it can be tetchy and anxious and angry. So like right from a young age, our mom had us playing every sport under the sun because she knew I better tire these boys out. Otherwise they're just going to break the place. So, and even if you think about, often we're asked like, where do you get your energy? What's the main food I can eat for energy? And most people are expecting, it's protein, or no, it's goji berries, or it's like functional mushrooms, or it's chag, or it's some sort of fancy hack. But unfortunately, the main answer that we give is it's oxygen. And the main way we get more oxygen is through movement. And by movement, I don't mean doing Ironmans or Iron Ladies or triathlons. It's walking. It's not very sexy, but it's literally the more like, if you look to the blue zones where the 5 areas of the planet where there's the most amount of centenarians, they found out that
one of the main one of the 9 factors that predicated why they lived such long, fulfilled lives, it was that their environment forced them to move consistently throughout the day. Whereas a lot of modern day kind of first world problems is that we're stuck in sedentary practices. It's really comfortable. We're stuck where, it's.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think I think we've retrospectively learned all these things of why movement is so important and why society nowadays is set up for us to be comfortable and sedentary. Like you wake up, you flick on light switches, you make your food, you get in your car, you sit at a desk, you do your work, you come home, you cook your dinner, you watch Netflix, and then you go to the gym. Whereas we're mammals, we're absolute mammals. We forget that our biological hardwiring has evolved as we were mammals that needed to move. We moved so much to stay alive, to find food, we wandered across the plains of Africa, and it was baked into our DNA that we needed to move. Sorry, you want to?
And even if you think about stress is so many people are against stress, but stress is so important as a natural biological response to keep us alive. It's designed for a sharp burst of movement. And if we don't kind of embody that movement, it sticks in us and it kind of builds up and it festers and it creates kind of problem. And the problem is a lot of modern day lifestyle encourages long-term exposure to stress.
So that's our rant on movement. So, and I could also say that we're fortunate that we're physical creatures. We're very physical. Some people are heady and theory and some people are heart and emotional. We're physical. Even to give an analogy, I remember when Steve went to become a snowboard instructor at Whistler, there was a ramp and he was learning to do a 360 off a ramp, on a snowboard. And it took him a full week, and he went down this ramp and threw himself off the ramp for a full week until he nailed this move. And he got it. And he finally got it. He was delighted with himself. And his friend, Simon watched him for a full week and watched him wrecking himself off this ramp. And then Simon just got up there, and his first time he did it. His very first time that he learned a completely different way. So we're physical creatures. So movement is baked into our biology that nowadays we're 42. We do yoga, we run, previously, I'd say the last kind of 15 years, we were very into Ashtanga yoga. So we do a lot of that. We used to, when we lived together we shared a house, we had a yoga room, and we do yoga every morning, 6 a.m. We were militant. We're very structured kind of people in that sense. And we do Ashtanga yoga military, for 15 years, I'd say we did it, and we wouldn't take a break or whatever. And then we realized that we were very flexible in some ways, but quite rigid in other ways. So the last, I'd say 5 years, we've really focused on a variety of different movements where we'll do animal movements or handstands, or, at the moment we're doing compression work, which is kind of gymnastics. It's more that playful gymnastic stuff of going, okay, I want to be able to do some of those cool moves that I see those people on Instagram doing. So we're figuring out how to do, we're kind of tracking ourselves back and figuring out how to do
then
them.
We'll swim and we'll run or we'll jump. But I think for anyone listening, I think that kind of wants to experience more kind of physical pleasure. I think movement is so baked into the underlying kind of concept of wellness. And I think, it's first of all to be aware that modern day culture has set us up to be sedentary. If you think about it, humans, we seek pleasure, we avoid pain, and we try to do it in the most kind of energy efficient means possible. And energy efficiency typically means that we'll choose the lazy option if given it. So, but in terms of us to feel good, we have to move consistently. So I think a basic measure, because, Peter Drucker, the famous management consultant, always said that what gets measured gets managed. So I think a simple metric for anyone listening is just to aim to get 10,000 steps per day. It's very easy. And I think if you struggle to do it, a dog is a wonderful walking coach. I think social accountability is really fundamental to this. If you're someone that's not very motivated, arrange to meet a friend, join a walking group, just anything to kind of get you beyond yourself. Because I think collectively we're far stronger than we are independently.
Yeah. And movement, I think is, sorry, no, you go, Jeff. I was
going to say there's so much good stuff in there. So many threads I want to pull on. I mean, particularly when you talk about stress, there's this concept called eustress, EU stress, which is good stress. Or, Wim Hof, for example, talks about the hormetic response, which is your body's positive response to short doses of low oxidative stress. So what he does is, cold hydrotherapy. And I know that you guys do that too. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about the groups that you lead into the Irish Sea every morning.
Yeah, so this is, and this actually, I forgot to mention that in the movement. It was, so we live right in the sea. We've lived on the sea our whole lives. And we used to swim in summer. We've always swam in summer. We used to jump off the harbour wall as kids and whatnot. And back, it was probably 7 years ago, we had young kids at the time. Maybe it was longer. Maybe it was 8 or 9 years ago. We had young kids, not together, but separately. And we were, as they do, they wake up early in the morning and we were walking them around by the sea at sunrise. And there was, we got in the habit of taking photos and putting them up. This is like 7 or 8 years ago. So we used to put it up on Twitter because that was the main platform. And people used to love sunrises. They symbolize hope and a new dawn and all that type of stuff. So we got in the habit of having time together. It was like a romantic moment. We'd go down together. We'd watch the sunrise. We wouldn't hold hands. We wouldn't write poetry, but we'd take a photo and we'd put it on social media.
And we'd have chats.
And we'd have a couple of chats and it'd just be nice. It'd be that kind of peaceful, quiet dawn. Like that's kind of that was a really sacred time for us. And I remember one day we were down there, it was September, probably 7 or 8 years ago. And there was a guy, it was a kind of nasty day. It was windy, it was wild. It was a wild Irish day. And there was this fella in swimming and we're both looking at him going, geez, look at your man. What a madman. And Steve's taking his photo. He gets his photo and your man kind of comes out of the water. He's wearing like a nice tight pair of budgie smugglers and he puts a foot up on the rock, sticks his chest out and he sticks his chin up to us and goes, you getting in, lads? And being like Irish from all boys schools, we were like, this was
very susceptible to macho challenges.
Yeah. And this was like, to us, this was like an alpha going, are you man enough? So we kind of both stood there, we banged our chests and we went, yeah.
We stripped off our clothes and we jumped into the sea in our loincloths.
We tore our clothes off. No, we didn't. But we went in for a swim anyway and we both, hit the water and we got out and whatever. And your man names afterwards, he says, I am Neil. And he was leaving at that stage and he says, I'm going to swim here tomorrow at the same time. I'll see you then. And we were like, yeah, of course, damn right. Yeah, we'll see you here at the same time. So we ended up coming back the next day. We went for a swim. We met him again. And the next day, just by chance, there was another lad on the beach. This is like at 6 a.m. or whatever. Another guy was on the beach there and he came over and kind of joined us. And his name was Hugo. We didn't know him at all. We didn't know Neil. And we ended up swimming. And the next day, Neil said, see you tomorrow at the same time. And it was like, yeah, sure, okay. Did it the next day. And then Caroline joined the next day. And then there was 5 of us. And then the day after that, Stephen brought tea. So now we had an excuse to stand around after. Oh, geez, that was so cold. Oh, we got tea. Oh, this is lovely. And you talk about it's a nice day and whatever. And we didn't know how long we were going to swim for because this had just happened completely organically. There was no kind of intention around it.
And there was this kind of underlying kind of belief that we're not one of those crazy people that swim in the sea all year round. But let's just see where this is going. This is something special and magical and it's just kind of unfolding. And we kind of, October came and we got in the first day of October and we kind of joked, oh, we paid our membership for the month and we'd swim then for the month. And it continued on. And we used at the time, the main social media platform was Snapchat. And Snapchat was quite interesting that it was very of the moment. Like I could take out my phone, do a little story and say, I'm having lunch at the Happy Pear in half an hour. If anyone's around, come join us. And you could come to the shop and this digital device actually connected us with real people. It was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And we used to get loads of messages in kind of saying, oh, it looks beautiful.
You forgot a piece there now. I'm going to fill in one little bit. Can we backtrack a little bit? I was just going to say that time once we started swimming, that ended up being like, we ended up during the first winter and that's been for 7 years now, like every single day at sunrise. And it's not a fixed time. It's like, what time are you meeting at? It's sunrise. So it's in summer, it's as early as 4:50 and in winter
AM, that is
4:50 AM. And then in winter, it's about 8:40 now. So it changes. Your morning routine has to adapt and
adapt to the sun's rising
and to the seasons, to the time of the year, to the moon. And little did we know, like it was one of the greatest things that happened. All that I can say is that it happened because there's so much connection with nature. It's almost like you're being baptized every morning that you go into Mother Nature and you bathe in this field of pure potentiality and it almost washes away a sense of like misery and whinging or anything. And you come out like feeling like, you're stripped to your, a much purer form of yourself.
I always think it's like bathing in optimism or gratitude. There's so many days, like even last week, you're walking down, it's a manky day, it's cold, there's a northern wind that would skin you. It feels like -1 and you're going like, why am I doing this? I am crazy. And you get down and you have no motivation, but you strip off because you meet Dave or you meet Linda and Detty, and it's like, okay, right, I'm getting in. And you get in and you come out going, oh my God, I feel reborn. And it's just this, like, you're just suddenly pumped. Like, it's phenomenal. And then even one part of the story, which I forgot to mention, was, so it started with just a few of us. It was like a little nucleus. And then little by little over time, more and more people started joining. And, it's gone from where there was 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And probably over the first winter, it kind of made it to 10 and 15. And it's now been 7 or 8 years. So there's probably 100, 150 of us that are in the kind of extended group. And there's been times where there's 1,000 people that join for swims. Like if I was to tell that little tiny story, as I mentioned, we were using Snapchat a little bit. And I remember we'd got enough messages coming in on social media going, oh, it looks amazing, it looks beautiful. Can I come and join you? And you knew most of those messages were coming from people lying in their bed. And it's amazing how warm and tropical Ireland can look in a 2-dimensional form. But the reality is, more often that Ireland is cold, it's windy, it's by the sea, it's raw. And I kind of got enough of these messages in the middle of, I think it was summer. I remember going, okay, right, it was a Tuesday morning. I was there with Dave and I said, here, listen, I'm doing this. And I did a little story going, right, we're having a sunrise swim on Thursday morning. This was on Tuesday. We're meeting at the Happy Pear at 4:30 a.m. And this is the big hook, free porridge and tea, and everyone's invited. And I said it to Siobhan, who was working with us at the time, and she said, why don't we call it like swim rise? Because you're swimming at sunrise. And that's a great idea. Cool. And she said, I'll put it up on the other platforms. So she put it up on other platforms. And me and Dave arrived at the Happy Pear that Thursday morning. We arrived at 4 a.m. because we had to prepare the porridge and the tea. And we thought, there'd probably be, 5 or 6 of us.
It'd be our brothers and maybe someone would bring a dog.
But we didn't have any big pots. We didn't have any small pots. So it was like, it's porridge. It's oats and water and a bit of oat milk. So we make a big pot, feck. Let's say we'll eat it anyway. And we walked out at 4:30 a.m. expecting it to be 5-6 people. There was about 150 people. And a lot of them had travelled from all around Ireland. We walked down the middle of the road. The sun rose. We went for a swim. We made love on the beach. It was magnificent. Okay, the making love bit was a joke. But we've subsequently had ones where we've had kind of 700 people, 1,000 people. And it's really, even through the pandemic, it's become such a norm. Swimming in, like when we were little, people didn't swim in the sea all year round. There was a few mad people did, but now it's normal. Like there's so many people swim in the sea on a daily basis right the way throughout winter. And we live in Ireland. We don't live in California. Like Ireland you've got a cold Irish sea, and it's not easy. Like every day, we've been here for 7 years, every morning, and it's every morning is a challenge. Like every morning I get down in that sea and I go, why do I do this? We are crazy. And every morning I come out as if I'd never done it before. I go, and I'm surprised. I go, oh my God, I'm annoying. I'm one of those annoying people that goes, you should swim in the sea. It's so wonderful. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Right. So Greystones, where you live, is on the east coast of Ireland, right? So you're facing east. So you're getting the sunset. The sunrise as you guys are actually getting into the water. Is that right? Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah. So we actually get the sunrise, like we can, but it's funny how, like when you swim in the same place 12 months a year, you're aware that the sun moves. Like you can see that during winter, it's much more round to the south. So it goes behind the rocks. So when you're swimming, you can't actually see it rising. Whereas in summer, it rises directly over the horizon and you get these glorious mornings.
Where you're like bathing in gold and just like bathing in gold. It just feels like,
treasure bath.
And it's ironic that like we never planned on doing this, but it's over the last number of years, there's been so much research about, like Wim Hof has obviously been a huge catalyst to this in terms of cold water therapy and whatnot, and nature and circadian rhythms and seeing the light in the morning. And we wouldn't have known any of this. We were just doing it. But it turns out just by chance that this is a really healthy thing to do.
Right. Well, you were reconnecting with how humans originally evolved. And in many ways, our culture has actually outpaced our evolution right now. And there's so many examples that we can point to. Our brains just are not evolved to be looking at screens for 12, 14 hours a day. There's all these different things. Like, I just interviewed this doctor, Dr. David Perlmutter, we used to forage for food during the harvest season in the fall, and we would gorge on food. But because our body knew that we were moving into scarcity of the winter, we would create what is known as uric acid in our body, and that would be a signal for us to actually store fat. So we were evolved to actually store fat as a good thing, because we knew that there would be scarcity of food throughout the winter. But now there's just no scarcity anymore. And so, I think connecting to our own evolution is so important, and it can elicit these exuberant states like you're talking about, like when you get out of the water, and you're just like, I can conquer the world, because we're connecting to some part of us that is the true hardwire of who we are. And it's it's really exciting. I think, you just nailed it, of like becoming comfortable with discomfort is such a key part, I think, of unlocking happiness and unlocking your full potential. And to be honest, you're right. There is all of these more geeky scientific understandings of why cold therapy is good. It oxidates adipose tissue because your body has to upregulate your temperature back into this Goldilocks zone of 98.6. So your mitochondria has to burn glucose, or in this case, if you don't have any glucose in your blood at that moment, because it's, in the morning and you haven't eaten for 12 hours, then it burns fat. So it's, it keeps you thin and fit and in shape. So there's all these other, downstream positive impacts to it too. So it's fantastic.
And one thing, sorry to interrupt you, is that like when you get into the sea, like the cold sea, and do something like that's extreme, that like it really puts you in your comfort zone on a daily basis. Like as Stephen said, it like it just you emerge as a different person. Like technically, like, and this is what a friend who's a microbiologist, she says, a marine biologist, she says that like, when you have a sinusitis and you often have to use saline water to clean out your nose or clean your nostrils, that's just seawater. That's just sterilized seawater. So when you get into that sea, like it literally, the cold water and the seawater literally cleans your senses. Like your breathing improves, your hearing improves, your eyes improve. So you literally emerge like you are, like there is an element of rebirth in it. Like that sounds very ephemeral. But then when you do that with a consistent bunch of people, you're in such a euphoric state. You forge these friendships that are really deep and authentic, and you form this community which gives you such a sense of belonging and provides so much meaning. And that's what's really happened with us, where there's this incredible bunch of people that they're not like normally you have people who are your own age and they're people that are into the same things. Like there's a lot of people who we swim with. I don't know what they do. I don't actually know what they do for their work. I don't know how they spend their day, but I'm really good friends with them. I know lots about them, which is kind of crazy, but that's
and just amazing when you stand with someone facing a common enemy, which is the cold sea, in a pair of swimming trunks or whatever, in a bathing suit. It's amazing how you're suddenly all equal. There's no, whether you're a judge, you're a doctor, you're a bin person, you're unemployed, you're all afraid of the sea. So it's amazing how it just kind of unifies, and it's very dignified in that everyone is equal. There's no above and there's no hierarchy. It's
democratic.
It's great fun.
Beautiful. Yeah, something is coming up for me that I've never thought about before as I'm listening. And so one of the reasons actually why we remember trauma and why it gets stuck in us as a pattern or a samskara is that traumatic events are often marked with a high spike of neurotransmitters like epinephrine or cortisol or et cetera. But I've never thought about it in the more positive or optimistic way, is that you can actually mark positive experiences of like community efflorescence, like you're describing, with peak endorphins or epinephrine also, so that you're actually, what you're doing is you're almost trapping or marking or creating synapses around positive experience with other people. And it's a beautiful thing. Anyways, something that just popped into my mind.
It's the same way that you go for a run. Like if you go for an early morning run and the sun is rising and it's one of those magical mornings where all the stars align and you're running with someone and the conversation just flows and you reach those runner highs and you fuse that, like the same way that positive emotion, it's infused in your body. You feel it biologically, and it's almost like it leaves an imprint on your physicality or whatever, your spirit.
Agreed. Okay, let's talk a little bit about restoration and all of the practices associated with kind of restoring the body day to day, whether that's meditation or sleep. You know, how do you guys manage to balance, or I guess I'd say refuel your tanks, which clearly are burning at a pretty high level?
Yeah, I think it's quite a challenge in the modern day culture where it's quite, it celebrates the hustler. It's kind of like, get out, make it happen and be proactive. And it's only kind of in recent years that it's being more celebrated, the sense of the need to restore, the need to slow down, the need to connect. But there are certain things like, say, as Dave mentioned, the sunrise changes throughout the year. And in summer, although you have to get up early and the water is warmer, because you're up and you're down at the sea at 4:50 a.m., you can often sit and have tea with people for an hour and a half before anyone has even woken up. So there's this kind of natural, you're standing there, you're watching the sunrise, you're having the chats, and the chats are typically, you could be talking about the bird that flew by. Like they're the conversation, because you're all kind of in this nice high, kind of slightly high state. It's just great crack is what we call it in Ireland. So,
but I would answer the question. Sorry, I would answer the question in a slightly different way if I might cut you off, Steve. Is that like we're both quite Germanic in terms of like we're structured, we're quite efficient, we're organized. So like sleep has always been like, we're fortunate in that we gave up alcohol 20 years ago. We didn't mean to. We gave it up for, as we said, for 2 weeks. And that 2 weeks just ended up being 20 years. We didn't really mean to.
Or it is still 20 years.
It still is 20 years. And it was really just, we found we felt good and we felt more ourselves. So that's definitely helped us not get lost. And like our rhythm has been pretty, and it probably started when we started a vegetable shop. We used to get up at 4:30 in the morning to go to the fruit market. We had a little red van and we had to go in and buy the veg for the day and come back. So we got used to the early mornings. So our circadian rhythm or our natural sleep chronotype is we are early birds. So, and as a result of waking up early, we go to bed early. So I'm like a 9-year-old or an 8-year-old. I go to bed typically around 9 o'clock and I wake up around 5 o'clock. And I'm like, you could set my watch to come 8 p.m. I'm pretty useless. Like I'm only fit for brushing my teeth, minimal conversations, very little focus, very little attention span. And by 9:30, like I am useless unless there's a dance on or something. So nice. Sleep is something that
I think we've been fortunate, and typically because we are such physical creatures and so active throughout the day, we find it easier to sleep. I think to move on to the other kind of restorative practice, sense of meditation. I remember when we were traveling, I was always fascinated with the concept of spirituality, because we grew up in a kind of a Roman Catholic faith, and it wasn't really practiced, but you went to kind of a Christian school, so you learned your prayers, and after about 16 you didn't have to go to mass, so you were delighted. But that was kind of the general, I guess, the spiritual faith that was around at the time, and I was kind of always questioned there has to be more. And I remember through traveling, I was kind of hitchhiking all around America and Canada. And I remember I kind of signed up I was in California. I just left Burning Man. And I remember...
How long ago was this?
This is 20 years ago or more. I'd been at Burning Man and I stayed around for a week to help clean up. And I remember one day I had enough and I just said, I'm asking for a lift from whoever's next, and I'm just going wherever they're going. And some fella said he was going to San Francisco, and I said, fabulous. So I found my way to San Francisco, and I remember I had two ideas in my head. I was quite conflicted. I was like, I'd read in some magazine, maybe it was in a magazine about some island called Hedonism, where you could go and it was like orgies. It was like seeking human pleasure and how far you go with human pleasure. Could you feel a more, connected, rounder human being? And contrary to that, I decided I'd apply for a Vipassana meditation center. And I thought, if I get one, I'll go to one. And if I get the other, I'll go to the other. And I said, I'd give it a week. And I heard back, thankfully, from the Vipassana meditation center. So I hitchhiked from California all the way to Texas. And I did a 10-day meditation retreat, and I found it, I was quite, I was kind of concerned about it, but it was phenomenal. I came out feeling like I was high on drugs, like just even having a conversation. I found it really resonated. And for a number of years, probably 2-3 years, we used to meditate 2 hours every day, even before. We'd get up at 3:30 and meditate for an hour before going into the fruit market at 4:30. So we were very committed to it. So meditation has been something that we did stretch a huge amount for many years. And then when kids came along, not between us, but separately with our own partners, it became harder to make time, or I guess there were other responsibilities and priorities and with the growing business. But in recent years, we'd start, and I say both of us, we kind of write our goals for the year. And previously, when we were in our high achievement mode, we'd write 15 things for personal, 15 things for business, and the list would be as long as your arm. But in the last 2 years, it's literally been meditate more, because I know if I meditate more, I slow down, I'm more connected, I'm not a busy fool, and I typically, my relationships improve. And often, if you look at the Harvard longevity study, they found it this pretty much like the quality of your relationships dictate the quality of your life. So I think it's, this has been. And I'm saying this largely to myself to remind myself that I should meditate more, because today I only did 10 minutes, but some days it's easier and other days it's harder.
So restoration, I guess it's kind of like we're good with sleep. We do our best with meditation. We don't beat ourselves up. There's no regiment or regime around it, and generally try to spend lots of time out in nature. We do spend lots of time outside and around people. Yeah. I guess we're fortunate in that we kind of do a job that we love, and it's around people. So a huge amount of our day is. But maybe that's not about restoration. So
yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. So the elephant in the room, nutrition. So what are the primary reasons that you choose to be vegan now? I mean, you gave your Genesis story before, but and I suppose this is a little bit of guidance, for other people that might be considering moving to a plant-based diet. Why do you find the primary reasons to be plant-based?
Well, initially, all I can say is back 20 years ago, we were playing semi-pro rugby. So we were big, muscle-bound jocks that we were programmed from an early age that steak equaled muscles, equaled man, equaled better athlete. And that was our dogma. And then we ended up going away traveling, and something shifted in us. And I think that we were awakened almost to spirituality and the curiosity around that. And with that kind of catalyst, wherever it came from, we started realizing that food, what I eat must have an impact on my body, on my spirit, on all these various aspects. So initially it was really, the curiosity was about health. It was okay, if my body becomes healthier and purer, my spirit will become purer, and maybe my evolution will be better. Maybe I'll become a higher, more caring, kinder human. And this was probably the idea which we had at the start. And then as over the last kind of 20 years of doing it, we've realized that politics starts in your plate. What we eat on a daily basis predicates the world we want to create. And that starts with our inner world as well, because statistically, 50% of the calories that we eat in Ireland, in the US, I think it's closer to 60% of the calories that people eat on a daily basis are ultra processed foods. So refined, processed junk foods. And probably 30 to 40% are animal-based foods, and less than 10% are typically whole foods. And our whole kind of mantra is...
What's a whole food, Dave? Just map it out there.
Okay, yeah. So a whole food, for anyone listening, is it's a fruit, a veg, whole grains, beans, and nuts and seeds. So it's really those 5 kind of groups. And you're kind of talking about plant-based foods in their natural form. So that's kind of what a whole food is. And if you look at the blue zones, the longest living people on the planet that typically live long, fulfilled lives, 95% plus of their diet is made up of whole plant foods. So our mantra is really less about vegan. And, vegan, we obviously have eaten a vegan diet for 20 years. And still do. But that word is very binary. That word puts people off as much as it brings people in. So our message really is not about vegan. It's about trying to encourage whoever you are to eat more whole foods.
Because if I was eating a vegan diet, for ethical reasons, I could eat vegan magnums, vegan hot dogs, vegan chocolate bars, vegan donuts, and I had a vegan burger for lunch. Woohoo! I'm a vegan. but I'm not really healthy. Yes, I am contributing to a healthier climate. I'm contributing less impact on animals. But ultimately, for my own health, I'm not necessarily consuming the optimum fuel to sustain my body. Whereas, leading research, and even from our own experience, we've had over 50,000 people through our courses. We've partnered with like gastroenterologists, cardiologists, bariatric GPs, so lots of different doctors and specialists in their field. We've seen the simple thing by eating a whole food, plant-based diet and how it can heal so many different aspects of your body.
Can I tell a story on this, Jeff?
Yes, please.
Okay, so as we said, we remember when we back when we were starting our Happy Pear story, Steve said he wanted to start a health food revolution. And back, I'd say it was a good 10 years ago, we were kind of, Steve was cooking in the kitchen, in the cafe. I was working in the vegetable shop and, we were ticking along. And this is 10 years ago. So, and we were eating a plant-based diet. And I remember one day a lady came into the shop and she said she'd lost 2 stone on Weight Watchers. And stone is, it's an old kind of Irish UK metric of she'd lost loads of weight on Weight Watchers. And I was
20 kilos,
something like that anyway.
Kilos, I think.
And I was like, wow, brilliant. Great job, Mary. And Steve was there and I said, geez, Steve, she'd left. And I said, Steve, people love measuring the improvement to their health. They love being able to quantify things. And Steve says, yeah. And he said, I wonder, could we do that? Could we do something that we could test, put a plant-based diet to the test
and measure people's improvement in their health?
Yeah. So, and I was reading this book. This is 10 years ago. I'm reading a book by Dean Ornish, who you probably know, Dr. Dean Ornish. Mm-hmm. It was one of his books, and I was reading this, and it was about the lifestyle heart trial, where he had showed over a year that when you put people on a whole food, minimally processed diet for a year, a lot of the indicators for heart disease were reversed. And so I'm reading this book, and Steve goes that book you're reading by that doctor lad, could we just do that? Why don't we try that? Let's see what happens. So it was great idea, Steve. So that Monday morning, we walked straight down to the local doctor, Brendan Cuddy, in our little town. We knock on Brendan's door and we go, how are you, Brendan? We're the lads in Happy Pear. We want to reverse heart disease. Do you know any nurses? And he says, geez, lads, you're in luck. Angela's next door. So we knock on Angela's door and we go, how are you, Angela? We're the lads in the Happy Pear. We want to reverse heart disease and we need a nurse. Will you help us? And she said, hallelujah.
No, she didn't. She said, how much are you paying me? We said 50 quid. And she said, I'm in.
Yeah. So we had a nurse. and this is 10 years ago. So it was pre-social media. So we created posters. And we put these posters on lampposts and on notice boards around the town and in the local church bulletin saying, reverse heart disease, skinny, sexy, delicious, free. And we had 20 people to sign up to our little experiment. And they came along the first night and Angela, the nurse, measured everyone's cholesterol levels, their weight and their blood pressure. So we had 3 starting measurements. And this is in a vegetable shop in a little town in Ireland. And so we brought everyone upstairs to the cafe upstairs, to the room up there. And as chefs, we kind of realized this is normal Irish people, meat and 2 veg. And we wanted to put them on a plant-based diet for 4 weeks. So we cooked loads of food. We got them to taste it.
To taste lentils and to taste what a chickpea is. And
we cooked
brown rice.
And we cooked really nice food. And they go, that's not too bad. Okay, so I've got to eat a plant-based food for 4 weeks. Okay. And people were up for it. They were like, okay, great.
And we put on videos of doctors just to show that there was science behind it. That this actually wasn't just me and Dave on a whim.
And this is, they came once a week for 4 weeks. And each night was like vegetable AA. It was everyone came along and they discussed how difficult it was and how it was and where did they get the lentils and blah, blah, blah. And we cooked food every time. It was a real support group. And the last night they came back again and me and Steve obviously didn't know it was going to work. And we really didn't. We thought if this doesn't work, we're going to have to, get a job in a bank or we're going to have to do something else because this underpins everything I believe in. But thankfully there was an average drop of cholesterol of 20%, weight loss, blood pressure dropped, and people were amazed by it. And this for us was massive validation. So we ended up, doing more of these courses, and the Irish newspapers wrote articles on it, and
it got too busy. It got way too busy where we were kind of being asked to not do our day job and just do this. So it was no, I don't want to do this. I love going to the market. I love cooking in the kitchen. So we built an online course.
And this was back 8 or 9 years ago where people didn't put their credit cards in the internet. And we built this course. We thought it'd cost us $2,000 or a few grand, and it cost us, hundreds of grands, and no one bought it. And then it took time, and then eventually it took off, and we partnered with doctors and dietitians. But heart disease is the biggest killer in the world. It accounts for more than 50% of all deaths. And, in many cases, what you eat has the biggest determinants on it.
Yeah, brilliant. And one thing that I don't think a lot of people connect is also what you eat and your mood. Where, I read this really interesting article and then subsequently did a bunch of research. And this goes back to the microbiome. But when you're eating fiber-rich plants, those are essentially prebiotics that are feeding the bugs in our gut that then produced what are known as postbiotics or short chain fatty acids. And there's, a number of them that people have heard about, but butyrate, potentially the most famous short chain fatty acid. And, but these upregulate your mood. And then there's also like particular bacteria, I think it's like a Lactobacillus reuteri, which actually helps to stimulate the creation of oxytocin, or, I've read that 80% of the serotonin, the sort of feel good neurotransmitter, is actually made in your gut. So there's so many reasons, from obviously mitigating some of the risks associated with heart disease, diabetes, dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer, all of the inflammatory oriented chronic diseases. There seems to be just overwhelming evidence. Study after study seems to point to the efficacy of a plant-based whole foods diet. And I love that you guys aren't like fundamentalist or dogmatic about it, because I think you're right. You kind of come in, guns a-blazing on some of this stuff, and people are like, whoa, wait a minute. Because everyone has grown up in a particular kind of environment and culture that, celebrates certain kinds of foods as part of their culture. So in some ways, this is just like a gradual process of getting people to try new things and experiment with, like you say, with legumes and chickpeas and lentils and this kind of phantasmagoria of whole foods, fruits, vegetables, etc. So there's just so much there, and I think what you guys have also tapped into is like the joy of it, the joy of the creation, or of the creation around it.
Totally. And even if you look at the American Gut Project, which is a piece of research that came out last year, I think it was around 30,000 people as part of the study, but they found that the single biggest thing that you can do to improve your gut health, where 70% of your immune system exists, is to eat a whole, like fiber-rich foods. And there was a magic number that not only was it about eating fiber-rich foods, it was about eating a diversity of fiber-rich foods. And they found that the magic number was that if you could consume 30 different types of fruit and veg, legumes, whole grains, nuts and seeds, or more. It was where you went from having kind of a functioning microbiome to suddenly having this high functioning microbiome. And microbiome is often seen as kind of like the control center of so much of your biological function. So I think for anyone listening, just try to eat more fruit and veg, whole foods, nuts and seeds. And it's not an all or nothing thing. It's just baby steps.
There was one piece of the puzzle there Steve forgot to mention, like fiber is, like, as we're mentioning, like it is a prebiotic and it's absolutely essential to the health of your microbiome, but you only get fiber in whole plant foods. You don't get it in processed foods. You don't get it in meat. You don't get it in dairy. And most of the world is going around obsessed with protein. Some are taking protein to build muscles. Some are taking protein to lose weight. But like 97% of the population on the planet get more than enough protein unless they're not getting enough calories. Whereas 97% of the population
it's about 90.
About 90% of the population do not get enough fiber on a daily basis. So that's really an indicator that most people listening probably aren't eating enough whole foods.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's a myth about protein. There's this idea that we're going to eat a steak and then it's going to magically appear as a bicep. And of course, our bodies synthesize protein on the cellular level, and really what we just need to get from our nutrition or from our exogenous diet are these 9 essential amino acids. Our body makes 12 of them endogenously, and those amino acids, the building blocks for protein, are available in plants everywhere. I mean, and there's, quinoa, which is actually, I believe, a complete protein that has all the essential amino acids, and many mushrooms do. But you can eat a plant-based diet and get plenty of protein. So that idea that that protein is confined to, poultry or red meat is just a complete and utter myth. And you guys have done a great job, I think, at helping dispel that. So let's talk a little bit about purpose and community, because those are and I can see these as intertwined a bit. So that's why I might put them within the same parentheses, and you can feel free to sort of flow between them. But how do you guys define purpose, and where do you find your purpose and meaning in your life day to day?
I think purpose is a tough one to pin down. I think community is an easier one to start with, because we're naturally social creatures. And I think nowadays we're living in theoretically a more connected life than ever before. But yet loneliness is an epidemic. It's nearly a pandemic of loneliness at the moment. Even if you look at in the United Kingdom in 2018 at governmental level, they appointed, the way there's the Minister for Health and there's the Minister for the economics and foreign affairs. They appointed a minister for loneliness because they found out that approximately 15% of the population were struggling with loneliness. And loneliness isn't the absence of people around you, it's the absence of belonging. So I think nowadays we're starved for this, and even more so through this pandemic, so many of us are starved from this face-to-face friendship. Even if you look at studies done in the kind of 1960s, it was in America. What was the name of the guy again?
Environmentalist Bill McKibben.
Yeah. So he kind of asked people, at a time of crisis, how many people can you call and turn to and know that they will come and help? And in the 1960s, the average, it was the 70s, the average answer was 5 people. Versus nowadays, when they ask the same question, the average answer is 0. So unfortunately, we've been trading, having more material pleasures and more material comforts at the expense of having friendship and people that will, mind us when we're struggling. And ultimately, that's what we need. If you think about, as humans, we evolved along the Sahara of Africa, and we survived not because we were the biggest, the fastest, the strongest, but we survived because we had the ability to coordinate and function together as one. And it was only natural that when we became isolated, we were anxious, we were nervous, we were afraid, because something could come and eat us at any moment. So it's hardwired into us that we're not built to be lonely. Even if we're an introvert, we have a need to belong. So I think community is probably our sweet spot in that, and gives us a great sense of purpose. Yeah. Like we still live in the same little town which we grew up in, which incidentally back this month it won the most livable community in the world, under 20,000 people, in the recent LiveCom Awards in Egypt. So it's community has been like, we've had our business in the middle of the town, and having lived there our whole lives, we know a lot of people. So you walk down the street and you just say hello to everyone. And there's so much, so many of these loose social connections, which are believed to be just as important as well as your immediate social network, like your friends and family, so you can count on. But your loose social connections are just as important for your well-being, your happiness. That's the kind of that you can say hello to. Oh, how are you, John? How's the match? Oh, did you see Liverpool? They won last night, or whatever. Like, you don't know who John is. You don't really know much about him, but you both enjoy saying hi to one another. And the same way, the person who makes your coffee, how are you, Jack? How are you getting on at university? Whatever it is. Those little things are just as important as those kind of deep connections, because it really imbues that sense of belonging, which is fundamental, I think, to human happiness and safety and all of those various things.
And if you go back to the blue zones, where the 5 areas of the planet where there's the longest living people, and if they boil down the 9 factors that predicate why they live such long, healthy lives, the number one most important factor for longevity is not what you eat. It's not having wine at 5. It's not faith. It's community. It's social connection. We are social creatures. It is so fundamental. Like, we've seen people who eat a perfect raw food vegan diet, and they only pick their kale at a full moon, etc., etc. But so many of them can be miserable. No amount of kale can heal a poor self-image. And I think community is so fundamental to rounding our edges, to helping us become more accepting, more loving, more caring, and more part of a tribe. I think
I think that wonderful expression that Malcolm X, I believe, said that the more we move from illness, which starts with an I, to wellness, the more we're moving more towards health. And I think it was, there was another lovely story where there was a yogi at a lecture was asked, what's the difference between illness and wellness? And he simply picked up the chalk, walked to the board, circled the I in illness and circled the we in wellness, and walked in and said nothing else. So I think community really is at the essence of wellness.
And I think when you break it back to like so many of the, the issues with modern living, like if we all had that sense of connection and those, more thriving local communities, I think the world would be a very different place.
Yeah. And even if you think, sorry, one last kind of bit, even if you think about like nowadays in social media, there's more and more trolls and bullying happening, but there's so little of it happens face to face. If you actually met the person face to face, you wouldn't say the things you say because you realize that they're a sensitive human like yourself and a flawed human. So I think the more we can remember to live our life in the kind of flesh, the more, and that sense of togetherness, I think the more we become rounded, happier, wholesome humans.
I agree. It's hard to hate up close. I got into this little pattern in the summer of 2020 where anytime I would get into a skirmish with someone over something that I might have posted, I would suggest a Zoom call. And it really took a lot of bravery for the people that took me up on it. But over the course of the summer of 2020, I had about 20 of these extended Zoom calls with people that didn't agree with me about something that I said. And
wow, where'd they go?
Unbelievable. I mean, at the end of the day, what almost always happened is we just started talking about our life stories, and then we found commonality and shared humanity within our stories, and whatever we completely forgot what the issue was that we started with.
I love it.
And a lot of these people then became, good friends, and we share memes and jab each other just like like old friends might. So I think that really is a point that this kind of what's happening on social media, although you guys leverage social media to bring people together in real life, which is one of the greatest attributes about social media. But often what's happening there is public acts really, but happening in private. And it's not about community at all. In fact, I think one of the things that you guys are getting at, which is really interesting, is that, we're more likely to know someone's Instagram handle that lives halfway around the world than we are our neighbor's name. Yeah. And I, and hear you guys talking about the blue zones very often, and then thinking about what you're doing in Greystones. I wonder if that could be a dream of actually making Greystones the 6th blue zone, which could be interesting. But I think, I'd love to just kind of excavate where you guys are in terms of your work and your creativity with regards to your local place. Because when you talk about fostering and cultivating community, what you really are talking about is something local. And so maybe you can talk about your ambition and all these ideas of growth that we were kind of alluding to earlier, and how they relate to Greystones and your local place, because you're living in the place where you guys grew up.
Yeah. Do you mind if I have a quick go at this?
No, go for it.
So I was just going to say that, I think that's so important, the need for local. And it's easy to reinvent yourself if you move to a different city and whatever and become a different person. But when you're in the same place which you've lived your whole life, people hold you to a certain standard, which is good and bad. It can be great in so many ways. But in terms of our mission and our purpose, we've just, we're in the process of signing a deal to buy 4 acres of land and start a community farm. So we work with our 4 brothers, and Dara he kind of runs the business now, because as you said, as founders, you're not very good at the operation. We've realized that a number of years ago, and our brother Dara is very good at that kind of stuff. So him and Paul kind of run the bulk of the company. And Dara's always been a farmer. He originally got involved with the Happy Pear. Obviously it was back when he was 17, so he was washing pots and it was money. But very soon on, he realized that there's very little Irish vegetables. You know, it's cheaper to buy veg from Holland than it was from Ireland. So very early on, he kind of wanted to start growing more veg. So he started a sprout farm, growing microgreens and wheatgrass and sprouts back a good decade ago.
So by sprouts like alfalfa, fennel, fenugreek,
broccoli, all these kind of super nutritious microgreens. But it's always been his dream to have a farm. So hopefully by the end of this month, we'll have a 4-acre farm, which is going to be a community farm. He wants to use it as an example to be of what you can do in 4 acres in terms of, he wants to be very open in terms of the finances, the numbers, the crops. So it can serve as a model for other people that want to start farming in 4 acres, because as the world continues on the path that it is, it's much more likely that we're going to need a lot more local food, because if systems break down in any sense, we are all dependent on these global models. So the more local foods we can have, the more resilient we can be. So part of Dara's dream is to have, to make it a really explicit model so others can learn about it. It wants to be a farm for local communities so that people in our town can be part of the farm. They understand what foods grow in certain seasons. Like, foods don't grow in the supermarket. You know, we obviously know that, but like, I think many of us who shop in the supermarket, you don't really think of where the food grows or how it's grown, or we're very disconnected from food. So we really want to make this experience more real in terms of getting these families up to the farm once a month or a number of times a year, so they can actually see what it's like, or work on the farm for a day, or
and to get kind of students, school people, disadvantaged
we have loads of dreams with it, so we'll see how all that unfolds.
It's going to be organic and regenerative, so it's going to be focusing on not tilling the soil to kind of release carbon, but where we're actually just sowing the seeds directly into the soil. So it'll be and largely kind of run by hand tools as opposed to needing big tractors or, you know, heavy machinery. So it's a wonderful project, but I guess the whole purpose of our business was to create social change. And one of the main selfish reasons why we started the Happy Pear was when we came back from traveling and we had changed our diet and lifestyle so much, we didn't know and have a community that would support us. So we decided, let's start a business that kind of espouses these beliefs, and let's attract other people and build a community around it. So it's been an incredibly selfish pursuit, but it's been remarkably, you know, worthwhile and enjoyable in so many different ways.
And even in terms of, so we've got the farm. Last September, we started a project in a local school where we have this online program called Happy Mind, where we have, you know, we've a psychologist and ourselves, and there's a performance coach, and it's very much about putting into practice over 4 weeks what we're talking about, really. And we did this program last, I think it was March, and we had 1,000 people or more through it, and it was really good. It was brilliant. It was great fun and great results. So we kind of thought, okay, well, there was a friend who's a teacher in a local school said that like the students were really struggling with COVID and morale, anxiety, stress, and all those things. So we said, okay, well, let's see if we can put this into a schools program. So we kind of talked to the local school, we talked to the local kind of education body, and they said, okay, let's do an experiment. So we bought, I think it was 120 smartwatches to measure their steps. And the whole idea was to measure steps, to measure the amount of food, like amount of veg they eat in a day. And it was to measure how much time they spent on phone usage. And then the tracker was going to track their sleep as well. So it was 4 measurements. It was done over 4 weeks. They did questionnaires at the start and questionnaires at the end. And we came in once a week in our food truck and we served them all soup. So it was and then they had 2 hours a week where we had videos playing. So it was going to be a pilot for, hopefully if this worked, we'd do it in multiple schools for the next one, and then maybe around Ireland, and who knows where it would go. And the first one, we did it in September, and it was highly successful. There was great take up and huge improvement in terms of moods, in terms of sleep, in terms of the awareness. And so hopefully we do more of that.
Yeah, beautiful. I just had tea with this woman who runs an organization called Denver Urban Gardens. And so over the last 2 years, really during the pandemic in the United States, they've built 190 community gardens in and around the Denver metropolitan area in Colorado. And wow. Similarly, because she was very, very interested in the relationship between mental health and community, particularly, you know, in the setting of gardening, when people are off their phones, et cetera, and they're getting their hands dirty and they're naturally having to help each other out. And so she ran a study as they were building these 190 gardens, which I'm anxiously awaiting the data on, monitoring mental health and its relationship to community and gardening. So I'm really I'm looking forward to sharing that on the podcast when she's got that data ready. But I think we all have an instinct of what that's going to show, right?
Yeah. And if you think about it, nowadays, like as a society, we're more and more disconnected. And I think at the root of all economies is food. And we're living in this globalized food system where we don't know, we're eating food out of season. We don't know where it's grown. We don't know who grew it. But, even if you think back, back even post World War I in the US, they used to have victory gardens, and people used to they knew their veg, they knew the farmers, they knew the land. We weren't getting into this kind of mass production model of farming where it was using monocultures. Whereas I think the move towards this kind of local gardeners, I think, is kind of almost an act against modern pop culture that can connect us, to our food source, to the world, to give us a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. And I think it's so accessible. We just have to start doing it. And through getting our hands in the soil, we improve our microbiome. Through spending times in nature, we're more relaxed. We make friends. We eat better. It's such a positive, virtuous cycle.
Yeah, I always look at it. This is an indication, a symptomatic indication of where the world has gone off the rails. When the butter that I buy at the grocery is the butter from New Zealand is cheaper than the butter that I buy from the farmer's market who is local.
Oh, that's crazy.
So, I think one of these things that we've all seen are the ills of globalism and mechanization and monocropism, et cetera. This world where the world is increasingly flat, with, fewer kinds of crops and fewer kinds of animals, et cetera. What we want is this really kind of diverse, bushy bell curve, if you will, that really kind of signifies the most vibrant and vital kind of society. When we spoke last week, and you guys were kind enough to have me on your podcast, we touched a little bit on this idea of moving back to the local. And it brought up this verse of the Tao Te Ching. So the Tao Te Ching was written by this Lao Tzu, this fellow that was supposedly born with a white beard. I love that fable. He was born old. And this guide, it's 81 verses, and it's really sort of a guide explaining the foundational intelligence of the universe and how we can order society in the best possible way. And at the very, very end, the second to last verse, the 80th verse of the Tao, I actually wrote it here on the side of my screen. It's a little tiny bit long, but not that long. But I want to read it because I feel like it's hones in on exactly what we're talking about. So I'll go through it really quickly. Imagine a small country with few people. They enjoy the labor of their hands and they do not waste time inventing labor-saving machines. Since they dearly love their homes, they're not interested in travel. Although they have boats and carriages, they are rarely used. Although there may be weapons, nobody ever uses them. They are content with healthy food, pleased with simple clothing, satisfied in snug homes. People take pleasure in being with their families, spending weekends working in their gardens, and delighting in the doings of the neighborhood. Although the next country is close enough that they can hear their roosters crowing and dogs barking, they are content to leave each other in peace.
I love that.
That was written 2,500 years ago. I mean, wow. The wisdom there is jaw-dropping.
Tai Te Ching is almost like Tai Te Ching. Normally, like verses from that can be very slightly cryptic and more spiritual, whereas that is very tangible and very like maybe the last couple of verses they get very practical. Certainly, a lot of the ones that I've read previous, they can be a bit of a conundrum, a spiritual conundrum. Whereas that is so easy to understand, and in our limited experience, we're 42, but I think
you know, like globalization we've all experienced, or we're all experiencing now. And, you know, there are certain elements that are working wonderfully, but by and large, as humans, there's a lot of dissatisfaction. There's a lot of emptiness, not a loneliness. It's not necessarily feeding our souls. We're kind of like hungry ghosts, as we spoke about last time we chatted. And I think the more we can move and celebrate that sense of local, the sense of we, the sense of connecting and stewardship for the land, I think the more we're moving towards happier humans.
And exactly as it said there, as Lao Tzu said there, that the more we can use our hands and get back into our bodies. And as you said, instead of spending 12 hours on a screen, like learn to build, learn to play, learn to be creative with all these various things, and get your hands in the soil and grow stuff, grow food that you're going to eat it. Then you're not going to waste it. You know, and maybe we'll be forced to go that way at some stage if we keep destroying things, but hopefully we get there sooner.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this interview from the Commune podcast, then I think you'll love this video right here.
The more peaceful, you know, more congruent life becomes. And so, you know, the offering is one of physical health, but also I believe more of a spiritual alignment as well.